Hi everyone, it's Monica, and welcome back to Tailor-Made Cards for You. Today I wanted to share with you a technique that I use to add color to some of my images. Now there's a lot of talented artists out there that can watercolor and Copic color their images, and I'm not one of them. While I do dabble in those mediums a bit, I can't say that I'm an expert. But what I can say is that I do have a technique that I use that adds some great color to some beautiful images. And it's not very difficult, so anybody can do it. I love sunflowers, and I got this large sunflower stamp from iBreak for Stamps along with this number background. And I wanted to show you some ways to use these stamps along with a couple of other background stamps that I have. It creates a really beautiful card, and anybody can do it. That's what's great about this technique. Now I have to warn you, it is a little bit grungy, and that typically is my style. I know a lot of you out there like the clean and simple cards, but I wanted to show this video to people that don't mind a little bit of grunge and give you a technique that you can use to add color to some of your beautiful images. So to start out, I cut a piece of heavy cardstock that measured 8.5 by 11, and like I said, I cut it in half. Now I'm using acrylic paint on this technique, so your cardstock does need to be a little bit heavy. The paint that I'm working with today is from Liquitex, and it's one of my favorite colors. It's the yellow Oxide, and it is a perfect color for sunflowers. The tool that I'm going to be using is a makeup applicator sponge and also my paintbrush. Now to begin, I just added some of my acrylic paint onto my sponge, and I just started dabbing. Now there's a lot of different ways you can create a background using this technique. You can have really heavy paint where it will be a little bit darker, or you can just have a real light touch. How much paint you put on your background is going to be dependent on how much of your white area is going to show. Now if you want a lot of color, of course you're going to be using a lot of paint. But if you want more white area, then you're going to want to be a little bit more light-handed. Now the reason that I like to use these two tools is because I don't necessarily want full coverage. Again, I do want some white space, so I go back and forth with my paintbrush to just dab it, as well as my sponge. My sponge will add more of the paint, but my paintbrush will give me more of the white space. So I have a few examples here of different backgrounds that I created using this technique. On some of them you can see that the paint is really light, and then on others the paint is a little bit darker. Each pattern is a little bit different, but you're still using the same technique. Now I want you to take note that I do have a lot of white space around my edge, and that's because I'm going to be adding some background. Now there's a couple of ways you can add background. If you like to have script or print inside of your image, then you're going to be using a smaller script background, and I'll show you an example of that. But if you're just looking to decorate the outside of your image, then you may want to use a little bit bigger of a background print. So before you get started, you want to make sure that your acrylic paint is completely dry, so that way you'll have a nice crisp image when you stamp. So the first background stamp that I'm working with is from Prima, and this is a great background stamp, especially if you like vintage. Now I don't have the exact name of it, but I will leave a list of all of the stamp sets and products that I used when I create these cards at the bottom of the video. So if you're interested in any of these products, be sure to check that out. Now the ink that I'm using is black archival ink, and I really like black archival ink. It gives me a real nice crisp image, and it works great on acrylic paint. Now there's a couple of ways that I could have stamped this. I decided to put my stamp horizontal, but you could have easily had it vertical as well. I wanted my script to be going in the right direction, but because it's a background stamp, you probably don't need to pay too much attention to that. But I just chose to make it horizontal because I want to show you how I correct that after I stamp my image. Now to stamp my sunflower, I am using my Misty tool, and that's because I wanted to make sure I had a nice crisp image. You could easily use an acrylic block, but you want to make sure that your first impression is the best impression. And sometimes for me that's not the case. So that's why I like to use my Misty. So after I stamped my image, I did find that the bottom of my stem didn't have all of the script that I wanted, but that was an easy fix. I just simply added some more ink to my script background and I stamped it where the line ended. Now what's really great about these big background stamps is they fit really well in your hand and they have some great backing. They're not very flimsy, so you can easily hold it in your hand and position it exactly where you need it. Now you don't have to add the script background. I just wanted to have a full covered panel. But that blank space would be great for a sentiment. Or you could also add some washi tape. Really, the design is your choice. But I just wanted to let you know that you do have an option. If your script image doesn't stamp completely, don't be afraid to go back in and add it to the bottom. And if you have that line, sometimes when you stamp again, you might have a line where you're actually stamping. You could easily add some washi tape or just add a little bit of color to distress it a little bit more, and it would fix it just fine. All right, so the next panel that I'm going to work with doesn't have as much acrylic paint. There's a lot more white space. So I wanted to show you this panel where I actually use the sunflower again, but it has a little different of a look. So just like the first panel, I am using my Misty to stamp my sunflower, and I'm using the black Archival ink. Now you'll notice with this panel, a lot more of the white space is showing, but again, that was by choice. Now once you have your sunflower stamped, or whatever image you're working with, this is where you want to go in with a background stamp to add some more interest. Now I like to use some of the bigger background stamps, but smaller background stamps would work just as well. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. Now this stamp here is relatively new. I think I got it from Stampendous, and it's a new stamp set. I just picked it up about a week ago, and this is the first time that I'm actually using it. And again, what I like about these oversized background stamps is the ease of holding it in my hand. I can easily add some ink to it and position it exactly where I want it on my background, so I won't cover my image. Now if you'll notice, I'm using the whole part of the stamp. I'm not just using the edge of it, but in some areas I do actually bend it a little bit, and I use some of the image in the middle. And that's because I do want to have different stamp parts on my background. And then I'm going in with my black ink, Archival ink, and I'm adding a little bit more interest. And you can do this with a lot of different mediums. You can add distress crayon at this point. You could add distress ink, but I was just adding again. I just like to finish off my edges when I'm creating a card that has a little bit of grunge to it. Okay, so the next background stamp that I'm working with is from Carabelle Stamps, and it is one of my newer background stamps, but I really love it. It has a combination of numbers and letters, but what I really like about it is it looks like washi tape to me, and I think it makes a great background. So I'm going in again, I'm holding it with my hand, and because the rubber stamp is very flexible, I can easily bend it to where I need to stamp. Now you're going to want to add ink as you go along, but keep in mind when you're holding your stamp, you could easily get ink on your fingers, so you want to be aware of that. Sometimes when I'm creating cards that I don't want to have any grunge, I'll wear rubber gloves, but for this particular stamp I didn't, and I did get some smudge on the card. But again, I like grunge cards, so the ink doesn't bother me, but if it does bother you, you can easily go in and cover it up with some washi tape. Now if you don't want to add your ink to your edges like I did on the first card, then you can easily add some more interest or make your card look a little bit more grungy by using your distressing tool. Okay, so now that I've given you 3 examples of how you can add some color to your card as well as some interest, I want to go ahead and show you how you can add some more color using a new product that I just recently picked up. Now these pens that I'm about to use are from Faber-Castell, and they're the large pit artist pens. Now I got these pens to work in my art journal, but I'm also trying them out on my cards as well. And these pens I really like. I only got about 4 of them, but I think I'm probably going to invest in some more colors because I really like the way that these work. Now what I wanted to show you specifically on this is you don't have to be an expert at shading to use these pens, and to add some dimension to your leaves or to your background if that's what you're working with. All you need to do is add the pen and then take your finger and smudge it, and that will give you some highlights. So where your ink starts is going to be darkest, of course, and then as you move the color, it gets lighter and lighter. So you don't have to be an expert at coloring to create some of those great shadows. All right, so I hope that you've enjoyed this video and my process for creating color background without coloring. As always, I will leave a list of all the products that I've used to create the cards along with the links to the stores. If you've enjoyed the video, I would sure appreciate a thumbs up. And leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about this technique. I know it's not for everybody, but I wanted to give you an example of what I do to create backgrounds when I'm just not in the coloring mood. All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.